Hello guys, welcome back to LR Anime. Guys, please like the video and subscribe to my channel. Today is explanation of Soul Land 2 episode number 81 based on novel. So let's start. Wang Qiuer turned and glanced at him as she said, "It doesn't make a difference even if we meet up with the others in your current state. You should try to recover first. Plus, I can't remember the way back, so we can only find our way slowly." Hu Yuhao naturally knew that her words made a lot of sense, and nodded while sitting down cross-legged and beginning to replenish his soul power. Wang Qiuer stood by his side and protected him. Hu Yuhao hadn't consumed that much soul power, so it didn't take long for him to recover. However, his spiritual wound had to be nurtured slowly. Hu Yuhao managed to completely stabilize his spiritual sea and regain all his soul power, and he leapt to his feet at once. "Do you need to rest?" he asked Wang Qiuer. Wang Qiuer shook her head. Hu Yuhao said, "Let's go, then. Let's get back to the others as fast as we can." He immediately began racing in the direction that they came from as he spoke. Wang Qiuer caught up to him quickly. "Hu Yuhao, are you in such a hurry to return to the others because of the company, or because of her?" Wang Qiuer suddenly asked as they ran. Hu Yuhao naturally knew which her she was referring to, and he shot an astonished glance at Wang Qiuer. This question totally didn't conform with her typical style, a little bit of both. "I want to get back for the company, and also for Donga. These two things aren't mutually exclusive," Hu Yuhao answered. Wang Qiuer pursued the issue and said, "The main reason is still her, right?" Hu Yuhao frowned and said, "Why do you ask?" Wang Qiuer changed tack and said, "Let's give it a name." Hu Yuhao wasn't used to her style of suddenly changing topics, and was momentarily at a loss as he said, "Give what a name?" Wang Qiuer said, "Let's give our martial soul fusion skill a name." Hu Yuhao finally realized what she was referring to and said, "Ah, yes. We should give it a name. I didn't expect the two of us to have a martial soul fusion skill, and our martial souls fused after the first time our soul powers came into contact. That's unimaginable." Wang Qiuer replied coldly, "What's so unimaginable about that? Are you telling me that only you and her can have martial soul fusion skills?" Hu Yuhao was a little speechless as he said, "And yet you tell me that Donga feels hostile toward you. Aren't you the same toward her? I really don't understand. The two of you look so similar, but you guys aren't more intimate because of that. Instead, the two of you start antagonizing each other. You girls, what are you thinking about?" Wang Qiuer's eyes became a little more tender as she gazed into the distance and said, "You will understand one day." Hu Yuhao shook his head in exasperation. The two of them quieted down and continued on their way. After a few minutes, Hu Yuhao said, "Our martial soul fusion skill can be called the Dragon Roar of Destiny. How about that? I originally thought that my twin martial souls would create two martial soul fusion skills with you, but I didn't expect all three martial souls to fuse together. I can feel that our fusion skill is more powerful than any one of my four fusion skills with Donga. However, just one instance consumes too much soul power, and Zhongliren escaped too quickly, so we didn't get to test its true strength." Wang Qiuer muttered the name that Hu Yuhao had suggested over and over again. "Dragon Roar of Destiny, Dragon Roar of Destiny. Can it be that this is my destiny? I didn't think." She finally paused when she said those words, as if she realized she had said something she wasn't supposed to say. "You didn't think about what?" Hu Yuhao continued asking. Wang Qiuer shook her head and said, "Nothing. Let's just call it the Dragon Roar of Destiny. The reason why we consume so much soul power is because every strike after our fusion carries a peculiar power, and I'm willing to call that judgment Destiny's judgment. The effects will be extremely terrifying if someone is struck by Destiny's judgment. That evil soul master has 8 soul rings, but I know that we would probably have taken half his life away if I had managed to stab him." Hu Yuhao asked suspiciously, "Destiny's judgment? That may be the effect that my Eye of Destiny carries. But how different is it when it's used along with your attacks?" Wang Qiuer said plainly, "I can feel it. That power of judgment is awakened by the Dragon Roar of Destiny, and its effects will remain on the target for eternity if it strikes someone. Furthermore, it can only be misfortune that." Hu Yuhao drew a cold breath. "Misfortune for the rest of one's life. No wonder Wang Qiuer thinks that Destiny's judgment is exceedingly formidable when used with her golden dragon spear. Having to live with terribly bad luck for the rest of one's life is more painful than death. If Zhongliren hadn't run away fast enough, he would probably have been the first person to have a taste of a lifetime of misfortune." Wang Qiuer said, "The truth is that I don't think we only have one martial soul fusion skill. The Dragon Roar of Destiny can work in reverse. If you have enough spiritual power, you can become the main attacking strength. That way, I will transform into armor on your body, and I will amplify all your abilities while passing some of my own to you. I believe your attacks would also contain Destiny's judgment." Hu Yuhao stared at her with a strange look and said, "How do you know all this? We have never experimented before." Wang Qiuer glanced at him, but there was a tinge of doubt in her eyes. "You also possess an ultimate martial soul. Do you not know about ultimate innate skills?" Hua Yuhao was momentarily stunned. Ultimate innate skills? What's that? Wang Chua seemed like she had a revelation as she said, I understand now. Your ultimate innate skill is the extreme cold from your ice element. It seems like your martial soul is still slightly inferior to mine. We who possess ultimate martial souls will normally have innate skills like soul beasts sometimes do. Your ultimate innate skill must be the pure and extreme cold. Or, you haven't unlocked it yet. Hua Yuhao was even more confused. Your ability to immediately understand the profundities of our martial soul fusion is related to your ultimate innate skill? Wang Chua nodded and said, I have 3 innate skills, Golden Dragon's Pride, Golden Dragon's Perception, and she stopped talking, and didn't reveal her last innate skill with Golden Dragon's Perception. I possess an almost 3-dimensional perception. It's a little bit difficult to understand when I talk about it, but simply put, it just means that I can perceive some things that you're unable to see, and I will develop a deep understanding of the things that I perceive. You've already seen what the Golden Dragon's Pride is and what it does. It relies on the energies of the Golden Dragon's lineage, and I am able to temporarily control a single soul beast when I'm using Golden Dragon's Pride. I can maintain it for a certain period of time as long as I don't attack it. Hua Yuhao was astonished. Even a soul beast at the Dark Golden Terraclaw Bear's level can be controlled through Golden Dragon's Pride? Wang Chua nodded and said, I know you would doubt me if I didn't explain this to you. Please keep my secret, alright? Hua Yuhao immediately agreed. He had a lot of secrets himself, and Wang Chua telling him about it meant she had decided to trust him. Their relationship had clearly become a lot more intimate after this battle. It wasn't just because the strange martial soul fusion between them had occurred. More importantly, Hua Yuhao had reached out to save her, and that melted the iciness in her heart, so they could become even closer. Their intimacy was developing purely as friends, and there wasn't anything else. They both had exceptional memories. Hua Yuhao had spiritual detection, while Wang Chua had her Golden Dragon's Perception. As they darted through the forest, they actually managed to follow their original path as they gradually came back to where they had last clashed with the 3 brothers. Wait. Hua Yuhao called out to Wang Chua, and paused in his tracks. Wang Chua stopped when she heard his voice, and gave him an inquiring look. Help me use spiritual detection to search for them. I have a feeling we are very close. He grabbed Wang Chua naturally as he spoke, as if he were grabbing Wang Dong's hands on a normal day. They had already done this not too long ago. However, Hua Yuhao felt his heart skip a beat when he clasped Wang Chua's hands once more. He turned towards Wang Chua subconsciously and realized that she was staring right back at him. Wang Chua and Wang Dongus looked almost identical, but there were many things about them that were vastly different. For example, their hands were very distinct. They both had slim and tender hands, but Wang Dongus' hands were always so cold and icy, and she gave him a feeling as if he had to take care of her. Wang Chua's hands were warm, possibly even warmer than Hua Yuhao's own hands, and he felt as if he were holding onto a gentle oven and being warmed up. Hua Yuhao found it hard to imagine that these warm, tender, and petite hands could possess such frightening explosive power, and this feeling intensified the more he held on to her. They had held hands before, when they were fighting Zhong Liren. However, they had been facing a powerful enemy, and they didn't have time to think about all this. All they thought about was how to give everything they had to defeat their adversary. At this moment, Hua Yuhao only wanted to borrow Wang Chua's strength to boost his spiritual detection strength, but there was an indescribable feeling that rose from his heart when they actually held hands once more. Hua Yuhao almost let go of her hand subconsciously. He already had Donga, so how could he lead other girls on? Even though he was true to his conscience, he didn't want other girls to misunderstand. Perhaps he was just thinking too much, but he wanted to prevent anything that could affect his relationship with Donga. However, just when he wanted to let go, Wang Chua grabbed his hand tighter and infused her fearsome golden dragon's soul power into his body. Their soul power immediately fused, and Hua Yuhao's abilities were instantly amplified. Don't think so much. Let's find them as soon as possible, Wang Chua muttered coldly, as if she could see into Hua Yuhao's inner thoughts. Hua Yuhao felt a blush come over his face. Perhaps he really was thinking too much. The Eye of Destiny opened again, and Hua Yuhao activated his spiritual detection once again. With Wang Chua's help, his spiritual powers were greatly enhanced. During the process of detection, his senses continued to extend 3 kilometers past his previous limit. Hua Yuhao's body turned slowly, and his vertical eye shone with golden light. The light illuminated everything. He didn't harbor any hopes of finding his companions directly. However, obtaining clues would make it easier for him to track them down. Very soon, Hua Yuhao's gaze fixed in a certain direction. Let's go. Hua Yuhao lifted his feet and dragged Wang Chua along with him. Wang Chua had no intention of letting go of his hand. When their martial souls fused together, their speed greatly increased. Hua Yuhao continued to use his spiritual detection to search for clues, and finally found the place that they originally fought at. The female bear's corpse had disappeared, but there were still large patches of bloodstains and marks on the ground. When they followed the trail back to the place where they had been separated from the rest, They didn't find the Shrek team there. Wang Chua furrowed her brow and said, "What do we do now? We don't know where they've gone, and the forest is so huge. Why don't we find a suitable soul beast for you first? With our strength, we should be able to handle things." Huo Yuhao shook his head. His eyes were filled with golden light, as if he was searching for something. Very soon, his gaze fixed on a large tree not far away. He walked quickly up to the tree and squatted down to take a closer look at it. Wang Chua had just joined Shrek Academy, and hadn't been influenced by Shrek Academy's culture yet. Huo Yuhao was different. He had been in the academy for a long time, and even gone through the ultimate soldier plan. He naturally recognized some of Shrek Academy's specific markings. After heaving a sigh of relief, Huo Yuhao stood straight and said, "They're all right. The three brothers should have left." This marking was left by eldest senior sister, which indicates that they're safe. They went in that direction to find us. As he spoke, he pointed ahead. Wang Chua nodded and didn't say anything more. The two of them continued on their way. On the way, Huo Yuhao used his spiritual detection to look for more markings left behind by Zhong Lushuan. His luck was pretty good, as he kept finding them. At this point, the sun was already high in the sky. It had just hit noon. Huo Yuhao didn't borrow Wang Chua's strength anymore, and thus he no longer held her hand. The two of them didn't speak to each other along the way, and barely had any interaction. Huo Yuhao walked in front, while Wang Chua followed silently behind him. Everything seemed very simple and calm. At this point, they were slowly venturing deep into the hybrid region. Huo Yuhao didn't move quickly. Whenever he discovered a strong soul beast, he would wait cautiously. He tried his best to avoid fighting. Wang Chua followed behind him, concealing her surprise. Zhong Lushuan had led the team earlier, and thus Huo Yuhao hadn't had a chance to lead. However, only the two of them were left now. He demonstrated his rich wealth of experience and composure by exploiting the terrain, using his spiritual detection well, and demonstrating his familiarity with the habits of various types of soul beasts. They rarely fought along the way. Most of the time, he avoided the aggressive soul beasts using his spiritual detection. Although it was also slightly related to the fact that there were only the two of them, it was mostly because of Huo Yuhao's control. Let's rest for a while before eating. After walking for almost 4 hours, it was already close to evening. Apart from fighting, the two of them were rushing to locate the rest of the team the whole day. They were naturally fatigued, so Huo Yuhao suggested they rest for a while. Wang Chua shot him a look and said, "I thought you were a machine who doesn't know what being tired is." Huo Yuhao was a little apologetic as he replied, "I'm sorry. I'm just anxious to find the rest in case they're worried about us." Wang Chua found a spot on higher ground for them to rest at. Huo Yuhao took out some dry rations and water for her from his storage-type soul tool. Wang Chua took the baked bun from him and heated it up with her palm before returning it to him. After that, she also started to eat. This was her second time eating his food. This time, she didn't waste any of it. Although she didn't eat quickly, she still managed to consume 2 baked buns. Huo Yuhao ate 4 of them. Since he was still growing, he naturally ate more. After drinking some water, Huo Yuhao said, "Wait for me here. I'll be back soon." He didn't tell Wang Chua where he was going, and ran into the forest. She was slightly stunned, and was in a daze as she watched him leave. She placed her spear on her legs and caressed its haft softly. Her eyes flashed with light as she was lost in thought. Is he going to return? For some reason, she thought of this even though she shouldn't need to. She didn't even know why she was doing this. However, she was afraid when she imagined that Huo Yuhao might not return. Fear was an emotion that had never appeared in her heart before. Fortunately, this fear didn't last for long. Huo Yuhao returned after a while, and he seemed to be carrying something in his clothes. "Come, eat this." Huo Yuhao squatted down in front of Wang Chua. He took out a bunch of purple fruit. The fruit looked extremely plump, and each was the size of a kid's fist. The juices from the fruit seeped from their skins. Even though it was evening and the sunlight was getting dim, the juices could still be seen glistening on them. Seeing that Wang Chua was in a daze, Huo Yuhao asked, "We can't always eat dry rations. This type of purple fruit tastes pretty nice. They taste sweet and sour, and are also quite nutritious. I discovered them when I used my spiritual detection earlier." Wang Chua seemed to only recover from her daze at this moment. She took one of the fruits and bit into it. She tasted a very strong sourness when she took the first bite. She felt that her teeth were going to fall off, and groaned slightly. She shot Huo Yuhao a protesting look as she lifted her head. Huo Yuhao continued to smile as he looked at her. There was a look of eagerness in his eyes. Indeed, her look disappeared in a moment. The taste of this purple fruit was very weird. It was very sour as it first entered one's mouth, but this sour taste soon disappeared. What replaced it was a refreshingly sweet taste. As the juices entered one's stomach, the refreshing feeling helped wash away one's fatigue. Huo Yuhao smiled and said, "The teacher who taught us about nutrition told us that the taste of this purple fruit is like life. there's always a sour and sweet part to it. How is it? It's pretty good, right? Wang Chua glared at him and answered, I'm actually a carnivore. As long as there's meat, I'm okay. Although she said this, he reached out both her hands to grab 2 more fruits from Hua Yuhao's sleeves. She took half of what he had plucked. Hua Yuhao smiled but didn't mock her. He sat to one side and started to eat. He left some at the end before wrapping it up. For her. Wang Chua asked yes. Donga hasn't had these purple fruits before. It's a pity that these were the only ones that were ripe. Otherwise, we could share them with everyone. Hua Yuhao answered. How could he forget Wang Donga as he tasted such a delicacy? At this point, a streak of golden light suddenly flashed. A sudden threat surfaced. Hua Yuhao moved his body subconsciously. He heard a puffing sound, and the handkerchief used to wrap the fruits was torn open by the streak of golden light. After that, the bag of fruits burst open as the golden light scattered, and the fruits were turned into juice before scattering on the ground. What are you doing? Hua Yuhao was furious as he looked at Wang Chua. She lifted her head and said arrogantly, I won't allow you to share what I've eaten with the rest you. You're crazy. Hua Yuhao clenched his fist. As he looked at the juice on the ground, he had the impulse to fight her. Wang Chua said proudly, if you're unconvinced, you can try. However, you won't get the fruits back even if you beat me. Hua Yuhao took in a deep breath and glared at her. After a while, he said, when we return to the academy, I'll challenge you. After he finished speaking, he turned around and left. He stopped resting and continued on with the journey. Wang Chua, who had gone through thick and thin with him earlier, actually did such an unreasonable thing. His impression of her dipped significantly. However, they were in the Great Stardow Forest, and it wasn't the place for him to rage. Wang Chua revealed a slightly lonely look in her eyes as she watched Hua Yuhao's back. She clenched her lips as she glanced at the juice on the ground. She lifted her golden dragon spear and chased after him. After this confrontation, they spoke even less to each other. Hua Yuhao explored the way seriously in front, while Wang Chua followed silently behind him. The sky was gradually getting darker. The Great Stardow Forest was much more dangerous at night. Many soul beasts would appear during the night, while to humans, nighttime was the time when they would feel tired. From the markings left behind, they shouldn't be too far from the rest of the team. However, they couldn't verify this conjecture. Furthermore, Hua Yuhao had also discovered that the rest of the group hadn't ventured deeper into the Great Stardow Forest, but were moving up and down within the hybrid region. Evidently, they were looking for him and Wang Chua. In addition, their anxiety was evident from the markings they left behind as they searched for them. If they slowed down a little right now, Hua Yuhao and Wang Chua would be able to catch up to them. I'm tired. As the sky gradually turned dark, Wang Chua suddenly shouted from behind him. Hua Yuhao turned to look at her. After 2 more hours of rushing, he had finally calmed down. He walked back to Wang Chua and said, then let's rest. The others should be looking for us. They should be resting as night falls. We can rest for 2 hours before moving off again. We must find them tonight. Otherwise, it'll be much more difficult to find them when they move off again tomorrow morning. Wang Chua nodded and said, okay. The 2 of them sat down, and Hua Yuhao retrieved some dry rations for her. Wang Chua asked, I damaged your fruits, but you're still giving me dry rations? Hua Yuhao stuffed the rations into her hands and replied, we're not kids anymore. Don't throw a tantrum again. Wang Chua was stunned by his words. Even though she was older than him, she felt like she was being lectured by an elder brother at this point. She couldn't help but clench her fists as she looked at Hua Yuhao's profile. She wanted to ask him what right he had to lecture her dash. However, she couldn't spit the words out, and only heated up the dry rations quietly before giving him some. Hua Yuhao said, after you finish eating, carry on with your deep meditation. You've never really rested properly today. I can meditate after you recover. As he spoke, he took the dry rations and walked to one side. His spiritual detection was still activated as he surveyed his surroundings for any potential threats. Wang Chua felt a little regretful as she consumed the dry rations. She regretted her impulsiveness, and could sense that her relationship with Hua Yuhao had grown more distant because of what she had done earlier. There hadn't been any reason for it. She had just done what she wanted to do. Her eyes were filled with a proud yet stubborn look. She even had the urge to throw the baked bun in her hand away before telling Hua Yuhao that she didn't need him to show her any mercy or lecture her. However, she was reminded of his teary look when she lifted her right hand. He was crying as he recounted the story of his mother and the baked bun. The pride in her eyes disappeared, and she stuffed the baked bun back into her mouth again. Her proud gaze slowly faded, and she seemed slightly lost. Be careful. At this point, Hua Yuhao's voice sounded. Following this, he shared his spiritual detection with her. Wang Chua's lost gaze focused once again. She lifted her golden dragon spear as she jumped up. She had also discovered the presence of a threat without Hua Yuhao's verbal warning. 3 pitch-black wolf-type soul beasts were coming in their direction at an alarming speed. These soul beasts were all more than 5 meters long, and around 1.5 meters at the shoulder. They were the size of huge soul beasts such as tigers and lions. It was very rare for wolf-type soul beasts to be so huge mutants. Huo Yuhao shouted. A white halo had already spread from his body. It was the halo of enfeeblement. The only reason why wolf-type soul beasts could be so huge was because they were mutants. They were even very strong mutants. Mutant soul beasts were a very important research topic in the academy. They were like mutated martial souls. After the mutation, they could become stronger or weaker. These 3 wolf-type soul beasts were evidently some of the stronger ones. Their cultivations couldn't even be clearly distinguished before they arrived in front of Huo Yuhao and Wang Chua. Huo Yuhao's mass enfeeblement was unleashed appropriately as it engulfed these 3 huge wolves. The 3 wolves weren't shocked by his mass enfeeblement. Rather, they seemed to have been provoked instead. A huge wolf at the front roared, and a layer of purple light started to rise from its burly body. It lifted its claws and stood just like that. Huo Yuhao was frightened. That was because the wolf looked like a human as it stood in that way. Only its head resembled that of a wolf. The protruding muscles on its body were filled with explosive strength. The unknown was scary. The 3 wolves discovered them just as Huo Yuhao sensed their presence through his spiritual detection. Huo Yuhao could clearly tell that they had found them by sniffing them out. The other 2 wolves also stood up, resembling the first wolf. They are mutants between wolves and apes, Wang Chua said calmly. Huo Yuhao was enlightened. No wonder their physiology is so special. Undoubtedly, these 3 soul beasts must have come from the same mother. Otherwise, they wouldn't look so similar. As he thought of this, Huo Yuhao suddenly realized something. The 2 dark golden terraclaw bear cubs were still frozen. Huo Yuhao had forgotten about them after his fight Zhong Liren, and he had since been focused on rendezvousing with the rest of his teammates. However, it wasn't a good time to release them now. These 3 wolf apes didn't rush to attack them. They first circled around them slowly. Not only did they possess physically strong bodies, but their intelligence was also rather high. This was also a very knotty situation for Huo Yuhao and Wang Chua. Such opponents were very difficult to deal with. Huo Yuhao and Wang Chua stood back to back. They didn't stretch out their hands to fuse their martial souls. Huo Yuhao's spiritual detection engulfed the entire battlefield, and a layer of golden light also covered his entire body. These 3 huge wolves were at least at the 10,000-year level. They couldn't afford to be careless. Suddenly, the wolf at the front moved, his body flashing slightly. Following this, a thick aura of darkness was released from its body. Purplish-black bubbles started to spread and approach Huo Yuhao and Wang Chua, a darkness-type soul skill. Wang Chua shouted. Seeing that the purplish-black bubbles spreading towards her and Huo Yuhao, she stomped her right foot on the ground, and a terrifying golden wave was unleashed. In terms of strength, Wang Chua's control was very strong. As she stomped, the immense quake avoided Huo Yuhao and didn't impact him at all. Some purplish-black bubbles were destroyed by this quake, but they still continued to force their way forward. Wang Chua lifted her golden dragon spear, and a sonorous dragon roar sounded. Her 6 soul rings, 2 yellow, 2 purple and 2 black, rose from her feet. Her first soul ring started to shine brightly, and a layer of thick golden light instantly covered every part of her body. This was her first soul skill, the golden dragon body. Wang Chua didn't say anything to Huo Yuhao as she stomped her foot before she burst forward. She targeted the wolf ape standing at the front. Her spear carried a piercing whizzing sound as it struck towards the wolf ape's eyes. Just as she attacked, the other 2 wolf apes also moved at the same time. They didn't try to aid their partner, but leapt towards Huo Yuhao. Evidently, they wanted to kill Huo Yuhao first by outnumbering him. Huo Yuhao's eyes shone, and he leapt forward as he used his ghost shadow perplexing track, following Wang Chua. In this direction, the bubbles that had spread all over had been dissipated by Wang Chua's golden dragon soul power. He turned in midair, and a layer of diamond ice crystals covered his body. It was the Ice Empress armor. His orange soul rings also rose from his feet. A blade light that carried an ultimate chill flashed before disappearing. The light projection that was formed engulfed the wolf apes that had burst over. Unparalleled chill, Empress sword. This sword didn't move smoothly. When Huo Yuhao wielded it, his wrist jerked slightly. This caused the sword to move in a beautiful arc. The chilly aura of his ultimate ice struck the throats of the 2 wolf apes. This slowed them down. The 3 wolf apes were very cunning. However, Huo Yuhao also had his own plan of attack. After teaming up with Wang Chua for a few fights, he had a deeper understanding and greater confidence in her. If she couldn't take care of the wolf ape in a duel, then they had no chance in a 2 versus 3 fight. That was why Huo Yuhao's goal was very simple: stall these 2 wolf apes in front of him and buy some time for Wang Chua. While they shared a tense relationship, Huo Yuhao didn't dare to abandon her as they faced common enemies. The 2 wolf apes stopped in midair. They seemed to have developed the same feeling, that if they proceeded any further, their throats would be hit by the terrifying chill. Even though they hadn't been struck by it yet, they were already shivering. However, a surprising situation occurred. As his unparalleled chill Empress sword stopped the two wolf apes, they suddenly disappeared at the same time, the instant they stopped in front of his chilly sword light. Shit, Hu Yuhao cursed in his heart. His spiritual detection could predict his opponent's moves, but he couldn't predict what their soul skills were. Both he and Wang Chua didn't have a sufficient understanding of these three wolf apes. He didn't expect these wolf apes to be able to unleash a skill like instant teleportation. Hu Yuhao didn't hesitate as he pressed his toes against the ground before flipping his body over in the air. Indeed, the two wolf apes didn't just avoid his Empress sword with their instant teleportation. They even landed behind him and started to encircle Wang Chua along with the other wolf ape. At this point, it was three wolf apes against Wang Chua. Wang Chua had stabbed the middle wolf ape with her spear earlier, but it was too quick. It had retreated instantly, and widened its gap with the golden dragon's spear. At the same time, its body swayed, and two illusory doubles of it formed. This soul skill reminded Wang Chua of spectre wolves. Undoubtedly, these few wolf apes must have some kind of blood relation to spectre wolves. The two spectres leapt forward and resisted Wang Chua's attack. She kept on swinging her spear, creating countless streaks of spear light. Perhaps she had been holding in her anger after her falling out with Hu Yuhao, but right now, she vented all her anger. The two spectral wolves that leapt towards her were torn to pieces. However, the other two wolf apes that had teleported behind her and the wolf ape in front of her all leapt at her at the same time. They all released an intense, purplish-black glow from their bodies. They first unleashed purplish-black projections that were roughly the same size as them. Three projections rushed out at the same time and burst towards Wang Chua. Wang Chua roared into the sky, and a golden dragon projection appeared. She started to combust like a small sun. It was her second soul skill, Dragon's Strength. As her figure spun around, she stabbed her spear into the ground, and her fourth soul ring lit up. Her dragon roars were even more spirited. The head of the projection started to expand and swallowed Wang Chua. Following this, a frightening explosion occurred. Boom! Wang Chua's fighting style was always so forceful. The tremendous explosion caused the three projections to be blown to pieces. Everything within a 10-meter radius was blown to pieces. However, the three wolf apes were too cunning. As the explosion happened, their bodies disappeared at the same time. They couldn't withstand the explosive force of Wang Chua's fourth soul skill, the Golden Dragon's explosion. When they appeared again, they were divided once again. This time, they were encircling Hu Yuhao. The three wolf apes combined into one entity, and purplish-black halos started to light up from their feet. The three purplish-black halos that lit up started to expand in size. When they combined together, Hu Yuhao was trapped. Instantly, Hu Yuhao felt that he was restrained by an immense strength. He tried to activate his soul power, but it stiffened up. An indescribable, terrifying wave of pressure dragged him down from the air. At this point, the three wolf apes had almost turned a transparent purplish-black. A formidable, purplish-black fog started to rise. The intersecting halos shone brightly and trapped Hu Yuhao firmly within. This wasn't good. Was this the legendary three-way martial soul fusion skill? There were two types of martial soul fusion skills. The first type was formed when many soul masters exhibited their compatible martial souls at the same time. While this kind of soul skill could be considered a martial soul fusion skill, they were enhanced only because the soul masters complemented one another. Real martial soul fusion skills were like Hu Yuhao with Wang Donga and Wang Chua. Their martial souls fused within their bodies, generating huge strength and causing transformations. This kind of transformation usually only occurred with two people at one time. Shrek Academy had a record of a three-way martial soul fusion skill. It was formed by the Golden Iron Triangle, which consisted of Liu Erlong, the Grandmaster, and the four-eyed Eagle Cat Flounders, Shrek Academy's founder. It was called the Golden Holy Dragon's Call. That wasn't a golden dragon, but a Golden Holy Dragon, which was light type. It was different from Wang Chua, who was pure strength type. It could be considered an enhancement of the Blue Lightning Tyrant Dragon. The Grandmaster had been a descendant of the Blue Lightning Tyrant Dragon. Due to their three-way martial soul fusion skill, they were called the Golden Iron Triangle. However, there had been no further occurrences of a three-way martial soul fusion skills in Shrek Academy's history apart from the three of them. This showed how difficult it was for such an occurrence and to achieve compatibility. At this moment, this legendary ability was used by these three soul beasts. Furthermore, they used this martial soul fusion skill very aptly and trapped Hu Yuhao, who was completely unprepared for this. Right now, Hu Yuhao only felt that it was very difficult to breathe. The immense pressure completely suppressed his spiritual and soul power. Even the Eye of Destiny was suppressed until it couldn't open. As the three of them combined into one entity, their powers increased exponentially. As a dark purplish radiance rose from the ground, Hu Yuhao felt that his body was about to dissolve. Hua Yuhao wasn't the only shocked one. Wang Qiu'er was equally stunned. She was as unfamiliar with these three wolf apes as he was. Seeing that Hua Yuhao was in danger, she didn't hesitate as she threw her golden dragon spear out. Amidst a piercing whiz, the spear carried the golden dragon projection and tore through space before landing on one wolf ape's body. However, that wolf ape only glanced at Wang Qiu'er. There was a scornful look in its eyes. Yes, it was a scornful look. Clang. The spear rebounded as if it had struck an indestructible wall. It didn't cause any harm to the wolf ape, while the dark purplish radiance had already risen from the ground. No. Wang Qiu'er shouted, and an unprecedented, intense golden light rose from her body. Her eyes turned blood red as her sixth soul ring was activated. Golden Dragon's Bloodlust. At this point, she was already shining like a small sun. No one could see her figure clearly anymore. A ball of orange-gold light separated from Hua Yuhao's body. It was the Snow Lady. She wore a solemn expression on her face. As her figure flashed, she appeared behind Hua Yuhao. She rapidly grew larger, and regained the original look of the Snow Empress. As she pointed one hand into the sky and one hand to the ground, an orange-gold glow started to expand. Hua Yuhao's body was engulfed within it. However, the Snow Lady's strength belonged to Hua Yuhao. She normally absorbed her strength from him, but there was an even greater strength suppressing him. Although she had given it her all already, it was only barely effective for Hua Yuhao. Hua Yuhao took a deep breath. He knew that it was impossible for him to retreat this time. However, he wasn't afraid at this point. With the Snow Lady's help, he had managed to suppress the rising dark purplish radiance. He was also able to exhibit some of his abilities at this moment. He first unleashed the Ice Empress armor. At this point, the Snow Empress' three ultimate techniques couldn't be used, as the Snow Lady was giving her all to resist the three-way martial fusion soul skill. Hua Yuhao's Eye of Destiny opened. His damaged spiritual origin was mobilized. His terrifying spiritual power started to combine with his soul power at a rapid rate. The aura of the Sovereign's descent started to soar. He wanted to use his cultivation to resist the martial fusion soul skill with the Snow Empress' help. He believed that Wang Qiu'er wouldn't let these three wolf apes off after they had used such a powerful skill if he could survive their attack. Just as Hua Yuhao was determined to fight his way out of this, a golden projection suddenly appeared in front of him. Following this figure went into his arms. Their foreheads met, and he could smell her breath. A vigorous strength engulfed every part of his body. The bright gold turned into thick scales that covered Hua Yuhao's chest and head first. Following this, they extended to every part of his body. An indescribable, tremendous strength circulated through his entire body. The terrifying suppression from before seemed unable to stop him at this point. Hua Yuhao was covered by a suit of golden armor. There was a huge image of a golden dragon head on his chest. His entire head was covered by a helmet, which also had the appearance of a dragon's head. The dragon's scales engulfed his body perfectly, absolutely no skin was exposed. Hua Yuhao roared as an unprecedented force filled him. The Snow Lady returned to his body immediately. Before Hua Yuhao could react, his new armor had already unleashed a layer of intense golden light as a defense. The suppressive force was resisted, and dragon roars didn't just echo in the outside world, they also sounded repeatedly in Hua Yuhao's head. He could clearly recall that he was looking at Wang Qiu'er's eyes with their foreheads touching when the dragon's scales engulfed his body. Her eyes weren't turquoise at that moment anymore, but a clear gold. It was the purest and most primitive type of gold that could illuminate the depths of everyone's heart. This video will end here. Thank you for watching.